Welcome to another episode of the Revenue Throughput Podcast. And I'm your host, Jose Palomino. And we've been talking about competitive edge, how you get a competitive edge, why you need it, what it is. And we spent a little bit of time developing that. And last week, we really focused on one of the four key dimensions of what makes a company have an edge competitively, i.e. how it wins and how it could win consistently. And we said those four dimensions is your value prop has to be sharply aligned with solving a key problem for your target market. And then we said value delivery, which we're going to get into today, and then marketing that generates opportunities and sales that closes them. So value prop, which is essentially how you're positioned, how you are delivering value, answering the question, why should anyone buy X from you at Y price? That issue clearly resolved. That's the big strategic piece. Value delivery, which we'll expand on today. Marketing that actually generates opportunities, leads, at bats, gives you those opportunities to actually turn into business. And then sales that knows what to do with those opportunities once you have them. But today we're going to focus on value delivery in particular. And we said last week that a value prop, and there's a lot of things we go into and we could go into how to shape a value proposition, how to develop it and so on. But we said it has to address four key things if you're going to successfully move a product or service in a B2B context. So if you're not selling to consumers and you're selling something a little bit bigger ticket, it could be a service like your law firm or you're an engineering firm. Could be an industrial service like you do painting or engineering, for example, or it could be physical product, either on demand like a contract manufacturer, or it could be that you're an OEM. You actually make a machine or a significant component that goes into machines downstream in your supply chain. So whatever those worlds are, it's very B2B. It's a very technical sale generally, in that the buyer is pretty informed about what you're talking about. And they understand it. And there's moving parts to that. And then it's also a sale that's usually what we would call a considered purchase. So a pair of shoes, a watch, and so on could be somewhat a considered purchase, like it's thought about, but the individual usually has the power and the kind of the confidence to make that decision on their own for reasons that matter to them. But in B2B, you're selling, even if you're selling to an organization where there's clearly one person that's going to make the final decision, there's the boss, there usually is a sense of wanting to build consensus. And if you sell to bigger companies, then you're going to be needing to sell to organizations that have maybe even a more structured evaluation process. And we said last week, the four things you're going to have to cover. And this is just, I repeat it because I think it's something that will anchor our thinking as we go forward in these particular episodes around developing a competitive edge. And the four things are that people are looking for in a value proposition in a B2B purchase. Look at it from the buyer side, is how do you affect me financially? So if you're selling something that's purported to help me sell more, like sales training, CRM software, marketing software, something like that, then how am I going to make more money? If you're selling me something that's more on the operational efficiency side, we're going to help your machine floor work more efficiently and maybe not have to buy another machine, that kind of thing, then you're going to save me money. But it's financial, the financial dimension. How are you going to save or make me money? And then the other dimension is time. How are you going to actually save me time or get me to something faster? If you get me to market faster, that's a time dimension. A kind of a first cousin to time. It's a different thought, but they tend to be in the same conversation very often, is how do you affect me in terms of hassle factor? The reality is everybody's busy. In the last couple of years, especially dealing with the pandemic and so on, and supply chain and labor shortages, people's hair is on fire. And they're really thinking about, how do I manage all those things? So if you come along and you say, I have a great solution for you, and you add to the fire, even if I would in a different time have thought it was a great solution, I just can't process it. And then the last dimension is risk and risk mitigation. And this lesson the world of business has gotten the last 2 years really emphasizes this. People are looking at their risk profiles much more closely than ever before. And large companies have been doing this with enterprise risk management, whole directors, and even senior or even chief level people in large companies focused on risk management. And there is a body of work around it that helps people really figure that out. But in smaller companies, it's dealt with, let's just say, a little less formally, but now it's more formally. So again, if you're bringing something to bear, if you're bringing something to the market, and you're saying, okay, you have to answer the questions: how are you going to make or save them money? How are you going to save them time or make them move faster? How are you going to reduce their hassle factor? And that's not just hassle as it relates to dealing with you, but do you somehow reduce their hassle they have elsewhere? It's like if you can reduce their overall hassle quotient with your solution, your service, they'll appreciate that. And then risk: how do you reduce their risk profile in the areas that they're concerned with? Again, that's supply chain risk, financial risk, employee risk, all those things that go into, do you impact that in some way? Now, you're not going to necessarily have something that addresses all four of those things to level 10, but you have to know that those are things that matter to your buyer, and those are the dimensions that they're processing, whether explicitly, like it's on a procurement worksheet kind of scorecard, or intrinsically because that's how they're feeling about it. Even if you're dealing with a business owner, they're going to have a CFO, they're going to have a head of operations, someone else in their advisory network. They're going to be part of something like Vistage or EO or something, and they're going to ask people, hey, is this a good idea? Has anyone done this before? People are more networked than ever before. So the reality is you have to hit that mark very squarely, which brings me then to the subject today, which is value delivery. So at the million-foot view, value delivery is simply saying, do you keep your promises? That's easy, right? All of you right now, you're thinking, well, of course we keep our promises. We couldn't be in business so we didn't keep our promises. And so let me modify that statement. Do you keep all your promises? You see, as you start refining your value proposition, as you start thinking about all the different ways you engage with customers, either prospects that you hope become customers or customers that have been with you for a while, you're making lots of little promises, kind of micro promises, as simple as here's my card, here's my phone number, call me anytime if you have a problem. First time they call you might not be to buy something else. It'll be because they have a problem. You just told them to do that. And it may not be right in the kind of the glow of the recent sale and you're installing the equipment. It's 6 months down the road, it's a year down the road where they can't find a replacement part for a wear part on your machine that they've been buying from Granger maybe instead of buying it from you, but now they're in a jam and they call you and you said you can call them anytime. Can you keep that promise? See, these are things that you have to be kind of more situationally aware of, that you're making these promises. Or let me say it a different way. Your customers are construing that you've made these promises. And then there's the things you put in your marketing material and your content that you go out there. The more aggressive you are in marketing your products and services, the more intentional you are about putting it out there on the web, putting it out there on social, putting it out there in terms of you as a CEO getting interviewed on a show like this, on this podcast or some other podcast or a news article in a business journal. All those things put you out there, and you're talking about your value proposition. You're talking about the things you do to save people time, save them money, save them hassle, reduce their risk. Okay, but that's kind of like making a pledge, and then the bill comes due when the customer actually engages with you. So you have to start thinking about, do we really keep our promises? I mean, other than an anecdotal sense that as you talk to your team, let's say your team is 10 people, 15, 50 people. Hey, are we committed to take care of our customers? Yeah, boss, we're committed to take care of our customers. Everybody's happy, everybody's cheering. Yeah, number one. If you're not measuring it, it's not happening. Let me say it a little differently. If you're not measuring it, it's not happening nearly as consistently as you think it is. So let that sit with you for just a second, because the implications of that are great. That's why that customer you had for 10 years that all of a sudden moved their business elsewhere and you were the last to know, kind of like a bad breakup in high school, that's rough. And it was because something wasn't being kept, some promise, some delivery of value that was promised, we call it value delivery, wasn't happening. So value delivery is something you have to measure in a couple of different ways, and you have to track it, and you have to be intentional about it, because it's not just that you made the widget and you delivered it, and maybe even delivered it on time, but there's subtleties to that. Let's say you delivered it on time in the quantity requested, but you know what? It kind of all came a little greasy. It wasn't wiped down thoroughly. You're selling something that's made of steel, for example. So that means they, on the receiving end now, have to wipe it down because it didn't come across clean. It's not ready to use. Now, you may think that's a little something. Maybe that's something you prepare for in your production. But I've seen this. Everything I'm telling you is stuff I've seen not be done properly. Or they ordered a dozen and you shipped 9 on time. And you tell them, listen, we just had and fill in the blank reason, excuse, and so on. And the next 3 should be there next week. But then another job started taking priority, another big volume job on the machines you needed. So those 3 to round out the 12 you promised don't show up for another month and wreaking havoc in their supply chain, in their promises downstream to their customers. These are the things that happen every day in industry, whether that's a professional service, is not just making things. So keeping phone calls, keeping appointments, being very communicative on things, setting expectations clearly, that's all part of value delivery. And then being consistent with it. I've seen organizations that do very technical things. It's amazing the brains of the people there and what they can do. They do big things and they do them very well, and complex things, but they actually do it on the strength of what we call the superhuman effort. That's to say they happen to have a team of people who are so committed to doing the right thing that they trust themselves to do it, but no one's writing it down. So a book I've often recommended, I still think it's the best in this category, is a book by Atul Gawande. He's a doctor at Boston University Medical Center, and he wrote a book called The Checklist Manifesto. And simply, his observation was, gee, these pilots who fly thousands of hours and have taken off and landed thousands of times still go through the checklist before each takeoff and before each landing, because they know the critical impact that missing one step in that sequence could have. And believe it or not, he found that, and he was a surgeon, that he found that in surgical centers, that level of detail to the before they cut in, so to speak, and immediately thereafter wasn't being followed consistently. It was all in people's superhuman efforts. Again, you had a superhuman surgeon, somebody who's one of the brightest people you probably would ever meet, a brain surgeon, heart surgeon, whatever. And everyone trusts, okay, they must know what's going on. But you've read the stories where somebody got operated on their left knee instead of their right knee. That stuff happened because there wasn't even a checklist. So think about your value delivery. And by the way, I'm thinking beyond, for those of you in manufacturing that may have put ISO procedures in place and you're ISO compliant. And of course, we all know that just means you're compliant to your own procedures and you've documented them. But what if your procedures aren't really adequate to ensure excellent value delivery? So if you're in the middle of that, I'm not an ISO expert, but I've been involved in more than a few of those projects. I do know that you really have an opportunity. If you're doing it, don't do it just for the certification. Do it because it's an opportunity to really think through the physical part of your value delivery. And for those of you who are not in physical manufacturing and so on, the principles are the same. Think through, what are the promises, and here's the takeaway. What are the promises I've made and how I'm going to impact the customer in terms of saving them money or making them money? What did I promise? And then ask yourself this question: how would we actually measure that over time? And how can I present that to this customer over time that it actually happened? How am I going to save them time or speed up their time to market? And how will I measure it? How do I reduce hassle? Specifically, don't just say we reduce your hassle. With us, there's no hassle. We are guaranteed, or we're committed to reducing your hassle. That's not a specific enough promise because it can't be measured. And then how do we impact risk? If you are thinking about your value delivery in those 4 dimensions, that's not all there's to it. There's certainly a deeper dive conversation into customer success, customer satisfaction, and so on. But just align to those 4 things. Your value prop may be, you may actually end up articulating it with better language, sharp copy for your web, for your literature, and so on. But at the end of the day, it does break down to this value prop promise that we make has to pay off with these realities for the customer for them to be happy. What are those realities? So you may not even tell the customer those realities, but internally you need to know that. And this is all about really connecting the tip of the spear, your value prop, into the marketplace with the rest of your operation, so that you're actually, as a company, committed to that value prop. Otherwise, it is just sloganeering. It's just a slogan. It's an empty promise. It won't move your market. It won't motivate customers because it's not grounded in reality of what you plan on doing. And what you plan on doing is only effective if you are actually measuring what you're doing and keeping yourself accountable to those promises you're making. So again, with that, this is just another cornerstone of developing a competitive edge, things that you can do to create a little bit or maybe a lot of bit of distance between you and your competitive set, so that when customers choose who they're going to work with, they choose you. This is the key to winning more and better business. Obviously, we have a whole program based on this called the Competitive Edge Program. If you want to learn more about that, how this can be realized working together, just go to our site, valueprop.com/edge. And if you'd like to connect with me on LinkedIn, we made that real easy for you. Just go to josepalomino.com and it'll take you right to my LinkedIn profile, and ping me there, and happy to talk if I can be of any assistance. With that, to your success going forward. Take care. Hey, thanks for listening to another episode of the Revenue Throughput Podcast. If you like this episode and if you like the series, make sure you subscribe below. And also, if you liked it, please do review it. When people are looking for something exciting to listen to, especially the kind of content we're bringing, which is practical insights for B2B companies, this is a place and a free resource that they can take advantage of. Let them know about it with your review. So subscribe, review, enjoy. Thanks again.